начиная в штурм города Счастье. Это далеко отсюда? Счастье это мы были. Вы были в веселой горе? Да. Все, начинаем штурм.
All right, test, there we go. All right, welcome in. This is the Ukraine. We are watching the beginnings of what could be a very tumultuous near future of our country, of many countries, many people. Not having too much of fun with this. So I'll get another couple streams up. I'm gonna get myself situated. I hopped on here in a frenzy after seeing the news, so bear with us, folks. Bear with us as we get ourselves situated, get ourselves ready to cover this. I'll be on for the next few hours for sure. Make sure you drop a like, and if you can, please share this stream. It is very appreciated. Helps get the word out. This is stuff that should be seen.
Incentive to tell the truth. So
right.
Everybody needs to be cautious about that. You know, again, I interact with Russians every single day. I don't see any enthusiasm for this war. Like, why are we attacking them? He tells us we're from the same nation, but we're attacking these Nazis. And the Nazi leader, allegedly, is this guy Zelensky. And I want to remind everybody, Zelensky's first language was Russian. We had a long conversation about it when he visited me here last August. He was a very popular television personality in Russia, okay? And so when it's hard for Russians to look at Zelensky and say he's a Nazi.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Putin needs this argument. That's who he's appealing to. He needs a justification for this incredibly unjustified war, not for us, but for his own people back home.
But if the goal is to cause people to fear what was an expansionist Germany in the late 30s, the interesting part about this, which I heard you bringing up earlier this evening, is it was September 1st, 1939, that under the guise of protecting Germans in Poland, Hitler invaded, and that started World War II.
It did, and by the way, 2 weeks later, Moscow invaded Poland too. So people need to remember that small fact about 1939, that aggression happened on both sides. I just think,
Ambassador, I'm going to ask you to stop for a second. I want to go to Kharkiv. Matt Bradley is there. He's hearing some shelling in the background. Matt, what's going on?
Hey, yeah, Ali, we are hearing some shelling right now in the background. It's actually behind the camera. We're trying to kind of figure out where it is.
I can hear it.
I'm not sure if you can hear it. It still sounds pretty distant. But it's ongoing. Again, though, Ali, this city, you just don't get the same impression as my colleague Eric McLaughlin was saying. You don't get the same impression that people are fleeing. We're starting to see public transportation working. It's dawn here. Taxis are circulating in the streets. But we are still hearing the distant sound of shelling. This place is a little different. This is eastern Ukraine. People here are a little more ready for war. They're expecting this to happen. And they are Russian speakers. They may have the belief that Vladimir Putin's military won't come in here and attack civilians because they believe, because they believe that Vladimir Putin believes that this is Russia, that this population here will go with Moscow. So a lot of people here, if people in Kiev didn't believe that the Russians would ever attack Kiev, a lot of people here have been living with that reality and that expectation for quite a long time, and they've thought that this wasn't going to be targeted at civilians because Putin sees them as Russians.
What's going on in the streets behind you? There's not as much traffic as I might have assumed for this hour of the morning, but what's happening there? Is the city waking up and operating as normal?
The city is waking up, and as far as I can tell, the city is waking up and operating as normal. I don't see columns of cars leaving. I don't see traffic. I am seeing off to my left here, you can't see it, just a regular bus, a city bus that's operating slowly, lumbering along in the morning. I guess bringing commuters to work. Things seem to be sort of moving as normal, but you know, it's hard to know how this is going to happen. We're waiting for more information from the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Defense, because we are right over the border from Belgorod, and this is a place where we've already started to see a lot of hardware mustering and a lot of troops mustering. Some of the big items like Sukhoi jets, attack helicopters, battle tanks, and self-propelled howitzers. These things, we're expecting them to come over the border. We did hear one report that we're starting to hear troops coming over the border. Mostly we're hearing that in the far south, in Odessa and Mariupol, but we still need more information. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we're just waiting for more information from the government at this point.
All right, Matt, stand by, and of course, if you hear anything or see anything, wave your hand and we'll put you right back on. I want to go to Keir Simmons, who's got new reporting in Moscow and Vladimir Putin's decision to begin this incursion. Keir?
That's right, Ali. Well, we've just been speaking to a former Russian official with very close ties to the Kremlin. Now, before I tell you what he told us, I just want to say that I think we need to borrow a phrase from previous terrible European wars, that the fog of war. There will be many elements to this that we will hear in the hours ahead that will turn out.
Shit, my bad. Hello, Lily.
And this conflict is just getting started. But what I have been told by this former official who's close to the Kremlin is that President Putin made the final decision at 3 a.m. Here in Moscow. It's now just coming up towards 8 a.m. In the morning. President Putin's televised address happened at 5:45 a.m. I'm told that prior or around the decision being made, that President Putin made a number of phone calls to members of his Security Council. So whether that is the case, we will find out, I suspect, in the hours and days.
All right, test. There we go. Perfect.
Statement from President Putin, that televised address, it's not clear whether it was live or whether it was recorded. Very likely it was recorded, but then that raises the question, of course, how much earlier was it recorded prior to it being broadcast? Right now, here in Moscow and across Russia on state television and on the main television channels, they are replaying that statement from President Putin, that chilling statement. A couple of things, and I pointed this out earlier, and from that statement,
welcome in if you are just joining us or for the first time.
Frankly,
welcome to the Bo No Show. We are currently just getting ourselves acclimated, learning about the story. There's reports of widespread, I don't know, not bombings or stuff, but shellings, loud boom booms going around.
But in that statement from President Putin,
they got the up-to-date story though.
Raise eyebrows and
there's not really a way to spin this to American stuff. This is more geopolitics.
And says, I urge you to
so it's going to be a little bit more cool tonight. MSNBC
will be able to freely leave the combat zone and return to their families. So that suggests
I'll be right back.
President Putin said there, and I take into account that there's of course an element of psychological warfare, that the Russian military and Russia's leader will be trying to terrify the Ukrainians, but it does suggest from that statement that aside from this air campaign, if you like, that there may be a ground offensive ahead, and in fact that former Russian official who has close contacts to the presidential administration, I said to him, we are seeing no sign. Richard Engel reporting just a short while ago that he is seeing no sign of any kind of ground offensive, but he said it's coming, it's coming. So take that as you will. I also asked him, this former official, I asked him, is President Putin directing this himself? And he said yes. That's how it's going. That's not surprising. We know that President Putin makes all the decisions. In the end, he will have had advice from that small clique around him, but ultimately he is the decision maker. And another element of his televised address, which again, just to reiterate, many Russians will be stunned by and will be waking up and just seeing now. Another element from that televised address, which is chilling, frankly, is that President Putin refers to Russia's nuclear capability and clearly openly threatens Western leaders. So he says, even after the collapse of the USSR, the loss of a significant part of its nuclear potential, Russia is today one of the most powerful nuclear powers. And he says, no one should, then I think this is a direct message to the West, frankly. In this regard, no one should have any doubt that a direct attack on Russia will lead to defeats and dire consequences for a potential aggressor. So I just will say, Ali, just before this all began, we did hear from French diplomats raising real questions about President Putin's state, saying that the man that they met was different from the past. And that, again, a worrying aspect as Russians wake up to learn that their country, frankly, is at war with Ukraine.
Keir, we're going to stay close to you. Thank you, Keir Simmons, for us in Moscow. It is midnight in the east. It is 8 a.m. in eastern Ukraine, or 7 a.m. in eastern Ukraine, 8 a.m. in Moscow, and we have attacks underway in Ukraine. We have heard the explosion of shells in the capital city of Kiev, constant explosions of shells. This is video being brought to us from the Associated Press. This is a highway out of Kiev. Look at the cars on the right side going into Kiev, very few of them. Look at all those cars that are leaving Kiev right now. Our reporter on the ground there, Erin McLaughlin, has heard shelling. She was on air with us when she heard that shelling. This is unusual because it seemed like a second phase in something that just began a few hours ago. As you heard Keir say, we have not seen the rolling over of tanks or artillery over the eastern border of Russia into Ukraine, but there are two regions in eastern Ukraine that Vladimir Putin has declared independent, and tonight he ordered a special military operation to protect those places. He says that he has requests from the leaders of those two republics that nobody else in the world recognizes as independent for Russian military interference or involvement, and that's why they have sent the activity that they've got going on underway. We have a few things going on that we should tell you about. Airspace has been closed. All civilian airspace in Ukraine is now closed. We have heard some reporting that the bombs that we're hearing drop in and around Kiev may be missiles. Someone in the Ukrainian government had posted that to a social media site. We've not been able to confirm that. As Keir said, these are the moments in which we are in the fog of war. We're not entirely sure what's true or not, but our reporters have heard explosions with their own ears. There are reports, Courtney Kube had suggested that the U.S. intelligence had heard that we would start with Russian shelling, perhaps, of military installations and or runways, airports. Ambassador Mike McFaul suggested moments ago that he had been hearing from people in Ukraine that it may be the airports or the area around the airport in Kiev that is being shelled. I want to go to our two reporters in the region. Richard Engel is in Mariupol, Ukraine, southeastern Ukraine. Erin McLaughlin is in Kiev. Erin, last we left you a few moments ago, you were hearing fairly constant shelling. What's the story now?
Yeah, we've been hearing missile strikes, cruise and ballistic missile strikes. That, according to an advisor to the Minister of Interior. It started in the early hours of the morning. The last 30 minutes, though, have been comparatively quiet. We are seeing a stream of traffic of cars leaving the city, and we are hearing reports that people here waking up to these explosions are evacuating the capital of Kyiv. We have just heard from the Ukrainian president. in a statement that he posted to social media, say that Russia has attacked military infrastructure and the border control in many Ukrainian cities, noting that people can hear explosions. He also announced that he is imposing martial law to the whole state. He says, quote, "Today we need each and every one of you to stay calm and stay at home if you can. We are working, the army is working, all sectors of defense and security of Ukraine is working," continuing with a common theme, trying to keep people calm, trying to keep people from panicking in what is, and there we go. I've just heard the first siren has just gone off. And I've been told by city officials that that indicates that this is a city under attack. That, again, is the first time we have heard sirens in the capital, Kiev.
I just want to hold on there for a second, because you've been hearing explosions now for a couple of hours, and we were asking about these sirens. You said they'd been tested. Let's just listen. The sirens are now underway in Kiev. The sirens are sounding to indicate that the city of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, is under attack. We have had reports of missiles and explosions. Let's listen for a moment. All right, those are the sirens we had been listening for. Aaron, stand by for a second. I want to go to Richard. There we go. There's the sirens again. Aaron, we had
been wondering, Ali.
Go ahead.
Yes. No, we had been wondering why we hadn't heard sirens. We all heard the explosions. We were wondering where the sirens were. I've been told by city officials that they had tested this system earlier in the week. They said it was working, and now, hours into this attack, we are now hearing this siren system alerting people that this attack is underway. Ali.
It is a remarkable development. I want you to stay with us. This is a picture the Associated Press is showing us. This is the traffic leaving Kiev now. These are all the people. Aaron's been telling us that for days and weeks there have been people who have been preparing in different ways for something that looked like an attack, but clearly a lot of people hadn't left. Aaron, what's the level of preparation that you were familiar with that people had undergone? You told me about parents who were sending their kids to school with their blood type signified in case they needed blood transfusions. What else have you heard?
Yeah, no, people have been preparing for the worst. While the government had been downplaying this threat, people were taking the situation extraordinarily seriously in terms of these Western intelligence assessments. People I've been talking to here, they all have their own evacuation plans, their own plan B. Some people have been sending their children to the western portion of Ukraine, to towns such as Lviv, which are widely seen to be safer portions of the area because they're closer to the Polish border. People have been stocking up on
this is
foods
escalating
and water,
real quickly.
that kind of thing. But really, deep down, I would say.
So I'm not gonna lie. I'm watching this stupid show on Fox called Next Level Chef with Gordon Ramsay. But I mean, I'm doing as much research as I can while watching these idiots cook. And but my God, has this progressed in just even the last 15, 20 minutes with the sirens, explosions in Kiev. Guns blazing. Vladimir Putin is taking the Ukraine, and we're gonna see if he stops. I mean, my God, what a truly awe-inspiring, spectacular. As an outside, participant watching this unfold, I personally haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I know I'm a younger man, but still, it is really something to watch from the outside. I remember Afghanistan and Iraq, but that was as an American. This is, watching from afar, watching someone else. I don't know. It's just, it's tremendously interesting. Like I said, awe-inspiring, not, in like a glorified way. And then it's also, obviously, I think to surmise the awe-inspired, it's terrifying. The possibilities that lie ahead for us. Let's check back in with them.
Describing. The Russians also just put out a short time ago a report that the military infrastructure of Ukraine is being destroyed, but that civilians would not be harmed. So it seems that the Russian narrative is trying to soften the population, to appeal to the people to surrender without a fight, to appeal to the military to surrender without a fight, because what is being described by the Russians and what we're seeing at this moment don't correspond.
Richard, talk to me about Mariupol, because it's going to become important. We've heard Matt Bradley talk about when there might be troop movements or when we might see people come across the border. You're on the water. There are a whole different set of defenses or offensive weaponry and techniques that the Russians have all through the southern coast of Ukraine.
So according to the Pentagon, Russia has 10 warships with Marines on board currently in the Black Sea. We are on the Sea of Azov, on the coast of the Sea of Azov, which is connected to the Black Sea. We can see ships in the distance, but they are not firing, they are not at war, they appear to be normal commercial ships. So any kind of naval battle off the Sea of Azov, as far as I can see from where I'm looking at the water, looking at ships right now, is not underway. If there was going to be a beach landing, it could happen all along this southern coast. But as of now, there are no air raid sirens here. There is traffic in the streets. We saw some police cars and ambulances moving with their sirens blaring, but it wasn't clear if they were responding to any particular incident. Although now, as we're speaking, I just heard one, sounded like one explosion.
I heard that
it may
too.
have been two, or that first one could have been the reverberation of the first explosion. That is the first loud and clear explosion that we have heard since this operation began. So we will see how that develops.
Yeah.
But that was on the outskirts of Mariupol. I'm right in the center now. That sounded like it was a few miles away at the very least. So we will continue to monitor that.
I heard that as you were speaking. We could hear that out here. That whatever it was loud. Richard, stay close as you get more. Just let us know. Richard Engel, NBC News chief foreign correspondent, who is in Mariupol, Ukraine. Aaron McLaughlin is in Kiev for us. I'm just going to ask my executive producer where she wants me to go. Mike Memoli is in Washington, D.C. Mike, you were reporting to us that you and your colleagues had heard that the president was talking to Vladimir Zelensky. Now we have heard that Vladimir Zelensky has released a video of himself talking about the fact that there is going to be martial law. We're hearing explosions. We're hearing sirens in Kiev. We're hearing, as you just heard with Richard Engel, an explosion in Mariupol. What is happening in the White House?
We just got a new statement, Ali, from the White House on the president's call with President Zelensky, and I'll just read it to you directly. He says, it's interesting, Ali, having read so many of these foreign leader readouts, I will stay at the front. The sort of more casual language in this president's statement, which I think speaks to how quickly they wanted to get this out. President Zelensky, Biden says in this statement, reached out to me tonight, and we just finished speaking. I condemned this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. I briefed him on the steps we are taking to rally international condemnation, including tonight at the United Nations Security Council. Biden saying that Zelensky asked me to call on the leaders of the world to speak out clearly against President Putin's flagrant aggression and to stand with the people of Ukraine. Tomorrow, I will be meeting with the leaders of the G7 and the United States, and our allies and partners will be imposing severe sanctions on Russia. That statement there making explicit what was implied by the earlier White House statements tonight, that the president will be, as promised, escalating beyond the sanctions that he had announced just about 31 hours ago, Ali, at this point. It was interesting. We had been hearing all along, this is now really almost 3 months in which the White House has been promising swift and severe sanctions on Russia if it were to go ahead with the invasion. At the earliest indications of that invasion, a little over 24 hours ago, they took that initial step, the banking sanctions, the sanctions on Russian oligarchs, the severing of Nord Stream 2, essentially. Now the White House and the president explicitly in this statement saying they will indeed go further now that Vladimir Putin has gone further. And we'll wait and see and try to work our White House sources to see if they'll be able to share what exactly those sanctions might be. We have some indication of what was on the table, sort of export controls, trying to limit Russia's ability to get imports, critical imports from the West, from the United States for its manufacturing sector, for instance, potentially even sanctions on Putin directly. But we won't get ahead of what the White House has planned at this point.
But we are going to hear from the White House. We're going to hear from the president after he's had the conversation with the G7 leaders.
That's right. That's right. The president speaking tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with his G7 counterparts. And then in the early afternoon was what the White House has told us at this point. The president will address the nation.
All right. It's still more than 8.5 hours away. That means markets are not open yet. I will tell you, though, that market futures are looking not very good right now. We're looking at an opening, and there's much to happen tonight, so it's a little early to talk about it. But all major markets are looking to be 2% lower right now. We've seen a spike in the price of oil as well. Brent crude oil has now topped $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014. We'll keep a close eye on that as well. I want to bring in CNBC's Hadley Gamble, who's on her way to Moscow right now and has just spoken with the Ukrainian foreign minister. Hadley, what have you heard?
Thanks so much for having me, Ollie. So essentially, I was speaking to Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, on the tarmac. He was en route from Washington to Istanbul, where he's going to have to take a car, essentially, to get into Kiev from a third-party country because Kiev, of course, has cut all flights. He told me this: we are calling for the fierce isolation of Russia. This is an attack on the world order. He's also saying that Ukraine is calling on the United States, the West, to immediately implement heavy sanctions. That would include immediate disconnection of Russia from the SWIFT system. They say that they need more financial assistance, more heavy weaponry in Ukraine at this point. But I've been speaking to this man several times since December, and the message has always remained the same. If you don't implement sanctions ahead of an invasion would happen, and it looks as if that is exactly what has occurred. Now, he did tell me in terms of what happened, a timeline.
Here.
This gentleman, the Ukrainians plan to fight for themselves. They've already been issued weapons from the government. The civilians have said they are ready to fight for their country. So this is a country, frankly, Ollie, that's up in arms. And as you mentioned, the market, the U.S. Open is looking to go 2% lower. But I have to tell you, the Asia markets have already been reacting to this story. As you mentioned, oil over $100 a barrel, popping above $100 a barrel. This is significant because the White House, Western powers declined to sanction the energy sector. And there's a reason for that, because this wouldn't just hit the gas sector, this would hit oil prices. And you've got to remember that when it comes to oil prices, the United States at the end of last year took 7% of their oil from Russia. So this would not only hit European powers, this would hit the United States.
Oh, yeah, it's exactly why it took a while before all the NATO countries were on board with some of these sanctions. It's why it took a while before Germany decided to cancel the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, because the fact is the world relies on a lot of the energy that it gets from Russia. Hadley also talking about the Ukrainians calling for the removal of Russia from the SWIFT system. That's a Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transactions. That's how world trade is done. If you can't be on the SWIFT system, anybody who's ever sent a wire,
bro, this is getting crazy real fast.
If you can't be on the SWIFT system, you can't trade with the
world. We got like 20 minutes left in this next level, Chef, and then I'm all yours, babies.
Continue to blare as a warning that Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, is under
bro, that siren is crazy.
Aaron?
Hold on.
Hi, Ali. Well, you can hear the siren sounds behind me. We have yet to hear further explosions. The sirens seeming to indicate that this capital is under attack. They had been preceded by hours of explosions, but it has been a while since we have heard the booms, the kind of booms that woke up so many citizens here in the Capitol in the small hours of the morning, according to an advisor to the Interior Minister. Cruise and ballistic missiles had been launched on the Capitol, striking military installations and airfields. No indication so far that civilian targets have.
So I wonder if they killed the mic here, because this is the live global camera, Earth Cam look at Kiev, the capital of the Ukraine. So, but once again, no audio. So, trying to see if we can get a live stream with some audio, because this is just like we said, it's all breaking. You know it is. We're all in this right now together. Hoping this will have some audio. All right, we'll chill with this for a bit. See if there's just we hear some of the sirens as we check out the sights and sounds of Kiev. Josh says we'll be nuked by Monday. Let it happen, man. It is what it is. Yeah, dude, that dude ain't playing around, Putin. He is wiling out. Shit getting thick. Bear Boy, welcome in. I'll be back in just a few minutes. Like I said, I'm watching the hit Fox show. I don't even know what it's called. Next Level Chef. It fucking sucks. But I need to know how. I need to know who gets into the finals next week, if there is a next week. Oh no. Is there any women in the chat who will sleep with this man who needs to lose his virginity? Hopefully he's a man. If you're a child, the deal's off. We don't do that. We don't play that shit. Josh, Taiwan shitting their pantaloons right now, dude. It's like the world, spins and everything, and then every once in a while, it stops, and then you just kind of have to react to it and realize that we might be in a new normal, and it's seeming like this could be crazy. Oh. So, we'll leave it on this for a few minutes. I'll be back. I got to smoke, and I don't know. I might make a pot of coffee, and get some vodka in it. 'Cause this is just, I don't know, man. Very uneasy feeling here over at the Bo No Show. Let me know how you're feeling. Yo, President Joe Biden is me. If anyone's curious, Next Level Chef is on break. And they're about to taste the food. And then 2 people will automatically go into the finale. And then the remaining 4 contestants have to have a cook-off.
Я не могу стоять 3 часа на улице, блядь. Мне надо пойти сейчас собраться, я выезжаю на передовую. Вот вы, вот это тахтия хаса, сколько мне еще стоять? Я стою, блядь, мне никто не сказал, отбой или не отбой. Надо идти готовиться, мне надо доехать на передовую сейчас. Я ему звоню, он не отвечает, блядь. Или берет телефон, или я просто вешу все, и все, занимаюсь своими делами здесь. Все, валите. Ну, блядь, они никто ничего не отвечает. Сука, блядь, они заебали меня. Этот не знает, тот не знает. Кто знает, блядь?
invasion is to stop the Ukrainian Air Force and Ukrainian military from mounting any kind of a response or defense, really, and especially any kind of a coordinated defense. So the ways you do that is you stop the Air Force from responding. Literally damaging, blowing up parts of the runway can cripple an Air Force, depending on what kind of assets they are. They'll also try to take out some of those air assets, most likely. Then also take out some of the air defenses. So when Russian aircraft are flying over, the Ukrainian military doesn't have the ability to take those aircraft out of the sky. In addition to that, one of the ways that you really isolate a military is you cut them off regionally. So you stop them from being able to communicate with one another, and then you also stop them from being able to physically reach one another. So that includes taking out some of their equipment, their ammunition depots, their vehicles, their command and control. One of the messages that we got from the Ukrainian government a couple of hours ago was that they were going after their control, the Russians were going after Ukrainian military control centers. That is what the U.S. military might call their command and control centers. So they're really trying to stop the Ukrainian military from mounting any kind of a coordinated defense in advance of the Russian military physically moving across those borders. Another thing that we've been expecting to see, and we're hearing from the Ukrainian government that is happening, is cruise missile strikes. So the Russian military already had dozens of missile assets all around that country. But the one that was particularly concerning to U.S. intelligence officials in recent days were those ships that the Russian military brought into the Black Sea and then into the Sea of Azov. They're landing ships, yes, they have the ability to bring mainly Russian Marines, but Russian military ashore there. But they also have missile capability, and those are among some of the Russian military's most precise capabilities for targeting from afar.
So this is an interesting point, because we have had discussions about the Ukrainian military and how fierce they are and how enthusiastic they are, but this is almost like asymmetric warfare, right? When you're talking about missiles, when you're talking about the sheer number of troops, when you're talking about the Russian-trained army, their warships in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, doesn't really matter how enthusiastic the Ukrainian defense is. They're not a match for a ground game with the Russians.
Yeah, and the Ukrainian military really has grown and expanded by leaps and bounds since just 2014. And that's come in part because they have had training from a lot of allies, including the United States. And they've also had weapons systems, all kinds of different, even non-lethal aid that the United States and other allies, the British, the French, have provided to them in those years. But the reality is the Russian military just dwarfs them, both in size, in capability. The Russians have hypersonic missile capabilities. They have advanced 4th and 5th generation fighter aircraft. So the Ukrainian military has grown in these last 8 or so years, but the Russians just have grown faster. The reality is the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian people are likely to mount a defense here, and it will probably be bloody against the Russian military. But at the end of the day, the Russian military just dwarfs them.
Did any alarm bells go off when Vladimir Putin a few hours ago made reference to the fact that they are a nuclear-armed country? Everybody knows Russia is. But the fact that he brought it up in the process of declaring military action in Ukraine struck me as unusually aggressive.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ali. And I actually asked people about that because, most likely when he's saying things like that, it's a message of deterrence, right? It's to say, look, I'm drawing this line. This is a capability that we have. And in case anyone's forgotten, I'm going to remind you about it. There have been some other recent deployments that have also been similar sort of deterrent messages from Vladimir Putin. He has sent some bombers. There are reports that he has some attack fighters in Syria, which is meant to be a very specific deterrent to the United States military. If there's any sense that the U.S. military is going to go in, he has those capabilities all over the area. Also, there are reports that he sent some of these hypersonics, what some military experts call super missiles, into Kaliningrad. We spoke about that earlier. Those hypersonic missile systems have the ability to hit every European capital. So if ever there was something that was saying, look, Vladimir Putin has laid out what he wants to do here in a number of different ways, both in this speech, in previous speeches, in this long written op-ed that he wrote back in July and released publicly. he has made it very clear what he wants to do here. He is also now sending signals, clear signals, but with things like these hypersonic missiles and these bomber deployments to the world and to Western allies and to NATO and to the NATO alliance that, look, I'm going after Ukraine. Don't try to stop me. And if you do, these are the capabilities that I have, and that he is making it very clear he is willing to use.
That is remarkable. When he said that, I thought that was something, we've come to expect everything these days, and that one I didn't expect. Courtney, thanks. Stay close, please, and let us know as soon as you've got any more updates. I want to go back to Kiev. Aaron McLaughlin is standing by. Matt Bradley is in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Keir Simmons is in Moscow. Let's start with Aaron. What's the situation there, Aaron?
Well, we have just heard from the emergency services here in Ukraine posting to the people, to Ukrainians, saying, we ask you to stay calm, not to panic, pack your valuables, warm clothes, and be ready to act accordingly to official orders. Military objects are being shot, and this can cause a threat to the civilian population. The State Security Service, Ukraine, is ready to help you. It has been a while now since we have heard the last explosion. The last explosion we heard was about over an hour ago. The sirens for now also seem to have stopped. People are continuing to evacuate the city here. Although while they're leaving in cars, we're hearing reports that some of the highways in the western direction of Ukraine are now jammed with traffic. But the streets of Kiev themselves, though, are empty as authorities are trying to urge people to remain calm. We have heard from President Zelensky in a social media post urging people not to panic, and he was urging people to stay home and to stay calm, saying that Ukraine is now under attack. This is a scenario which really the Ukrainian government had been downplaying for some time. As early as the beginning of this week, President Zelensky saying that he did not think that Russia and Ukraine were going to go to war. But this morning, the blasts that woke people in the capital, obviously indicating that war is now very much underway, as we're waiting to hear more from authorities in terms of their next steps. I spoke to the Ukrainian president's spokesperson a short while ago and asked him where the Ukrainian president is. He declined to comment, Ali.
Aaron, have you been able to get, I know you're working hard and you're paying attention to everything that's going on, but we're not sure where, clearly you heard explosions in Kiev. We were together when you heard them. Then you heard the attack sirens. Do we know where those explosions happened yet? And I'm asking you because when I was talking to Ambassador McFaul earlier, he seemed to think that he was hearing from people in Ukraine who thought at least some of them might be near the airport, although you indicated you were hearing them from different directions.
Yeah, I was hearing explosions really at all sides from where I am right now, really in the heart of the capital. I was hearing explosions to my left, to my right, and then directly behind me. Unclear where exactly, precisely those explosions were happening. Of course, we did hear from an advisor to the Minister of the Interior say that ballistic missiles were launched, striking a number of military installations as well as airfields, though we have no further clarity from authorities on specific targets at this time, Ali.
Okay, as soon as you hear about that, please let me know. Obviously, it's militarily significant and important if they're hitting the airports because Ukraine doesn't have a massive air defense capability.
Stay there! Stay down, Shasta! Just stay down!
right, Priscilla joins us now live in studio. We still don't know the motive for Michelle Tadeo's murder so far, but I do want to talk to you about Mexico's president because it's odd. At times he says he's addressing these killings, but he's also had somewhat of a contentious relationship with the press.
Yeah, Tom. Last year he actually began hosting these press conferences where he would call out what he deems lies in the media, at times even singling.
There is what looks like the beginnings of some panic buying, but again, the situation here in Kharkiv is remarkably different from where Aaron is in Kiev, where it seems like you're hearing sirens, where people are flooding out of the city. But there are successive bombings. We haven't heard one in a couple of hours now. But it seems as though we are starting to hear about a ground invasion and engagement with the Russian military. One interesting thing about this was that they're being supported by Belarus, this comment. Of course, they're coming from the Belarusian side as well. But it sounds as though they're being supported by Belarus. And that's an interesting little detail here, and one that I think is going to become very relevant in the coming days, because Belarus and its president Lukashenko have been so close with Vladimir Putin, so cooperative. And now we're starting to really see the effects of that, with Belarus being used as a staging ground for part of this operation. And, you know, Belarus, ever since the late 1990s, they've had kind of a deal to create what's been called a union state, Vladimir Putin's effort to try to sort of reconstitute the former Soviet Union. This is one of his ambitions and could be one of the underlying notions of why he's coming into Ukraine, because we keep asking that question, why is he invading Ukraine? And we know, of course, that Vladimir Putin considers the collapse of the Soviet Union, he's said this, to be one of the most, the biggest political disasters of the 20th century. Reconstituting it for him, or at least reconstituting some sort of sphere of influence that would include Belarus and Ukraine. It's one of the motives behind the dramatic actions he's taking this morning.
Yeah, well, when you look at the map and you look at from the Baltics to the Black Sea, only Ukraine is in the way for Russia's purposes. Belarus is not a NATO country. It is strongly in the pro-Russia camp, and this is what is so alarming to those NATO countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and even Estonia. Matt, we're going to come back to you very shortly. If you get a chance to look around and let us know what's going on, we'll come right back to you. I want to go to Moscow now. Keir Simmons is standing by there. He's got some news out of Moscow. Keir, it's morning there. What's happening?
Yeah, it's just coming up to 9 in the morning here in Moscow. The traffic, the streets are just as calm as you might expect. This city, of course, not being targeted the way that multiple cities there in Ukraine are. Russian people waking up to first see that speech by President Putin that happened at 5:45 in the morning, just being replayed again and again and again. It was almost as if the Russian television stations took time to kind of get started and begin their morning news programs, perhaps even many of those journalists wondering what to say, because I can tell you Russians across this country will be stunned. One little piece of news, Ali, we're hearing that the airports inside Russia close to Ukraine, multiple of those airports in the southern area of Russia near Ukraine, those are being closed. I think that's not surprising, to stop civilian aircraft from flying while there is an air campaign taking place close to those airports. And another piece of news from here too on the financial side, Ali. So the Moscow exchange has been suspended after shares dropped heavily. The ruble is frankly in free fall. It's hard to tell you what the value of the ruble is right now, because it's a straight line down against the dollar. And I think this goes to an important question right now for Russians and for President Putin, Ali, and I know I'm on your territory here when we talk about this. What we have been talking about up until now is the potential impact of sanctions. And clearly the markets will be very worried about the uncertainty. What will those sanctions look like? But there's also a question of the uncertainty of a conflict. Once a war is started, you don't know what happens. We definitely don't know how this is going to play out in Ukraine. For the Russian people right now, they're seeing the value of their currency fall. And as you know only too well, the next impact of that is heavy inflation if that continues. So aside from the question of sanctions, what the Russian people are waking up to right now is a heavy impact on their economy. How will that affect their psychology? You're going to have these twin track issues. One is, how is this conflict playing out for President Putin? And on the other hand, what is it doing to the Russian economy? Aside from the sanctions, what will it be doing to the Russian economy? What will it be doing to the value of Russian savings? What impact will that be having on Russian public opinion. President Putin clearly has made the calculation, and the opinion polls have shown that many Russian people haven't wanted this conflict, have hoped this conflict doesn't happen, but President Putin has clearly made the calculation that he can lead his people into this war and that they will support him. But he does have a domestic issues to deal with, primarily the economy, the standard of living for ordinary Russians, and that is going to be a challenge for him if the markets continue to react in the way they are in these early hours.
In fact, in 2014 and in years before in Ukraine, that's been the source of so much of the discontent, is people not seeing prosperity. I'm always happy when you wander into this space. I will tell you, European markets are not open yet, but it is looking like we are looking at a more than a 2% drop across the board on U.S. markets, which would be about a 700-point drop on the Dow. But more importantly, the price of oil, the price of gold is soaring. The price of oil is up internationally over $102 an ounce now for Brent crude, almost $97 an ounce for the crude that we use here in the United States. So I guess this is a long way of me asking you, Keir, what's the long game for Vladimir Putin right now? Because you don't know economically how war works out in the short term, and it often isn't good for regular people. But Putin's got something else in mind. He's got empire building in mind here.
Yeah, he has. And we should just mention, when you talk about the price of crude, of course, there is this terrible reality that the higher the price of crude goes, the more money Russia makes, because, of course, it is an energy supplier. But that only goes so far if the currency is taking a beating, frankly, because of the other implications that has for people's savings and for inflation here in Russia. Just in terms of, what is Vladimir Putin's aim here? I think another aspect, we've talked about some of the things he said in that speech in the early hours of the morning here, how he talked about Russia's nuclear capability, how chilling that is to hear him talk about that at a point at which he launches this war in Ukraine, because it's clearly directed at the West, saying, listen, I have nuclear weapons, so be careful what you do in reaction to this. So that is frankly chilling. But also in that speech, he once again talks about NATO. Now, we've said it again and again, and everybody watching will know this, of course, Ukraine is not part of NATO. So at the same time as launching this conflict in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin once again saying that this is a part of his opposition to NATO. He's not fighting NATO right now. And so to answer your question, I think what his aims aren't clear. Is he trying to bring down the government of Ukraine? That seems pretty likely, pretty clear. What is his plan after that? We simply don't know. Does he plan to try to occupy the country? We simply don't know. We think that seems unlikely, not least because of Russia's experience in Afghanistan. Before America's experience in Afghanistan, of course, Russia had a very negative experience of trying to run Afghanistan. So it seems just hard to comprehend that President Putin's plan might be to try and occupy Ukraine. But of course, the issue would be even if he does manage to bring down the Zelensky government, what is he going to be able to put in its place? These are the kind of unknowns that will be worrying the financial markets around the world this morning, and very much so here in Russia. And these are the kind of questions that you begin to ask as the conflict starts, because you never know how a conflict ends.
You are absolutely right about that, Keir. Thank you for your reporting on this. We're going to stay close to you through the course of this night. It is 1 a.m. In New York. We are here from NBC World Headquarters, and we are looking at a dramatic situation in Ukraine. It is 8 a.m. in eastern Ukraine, 9 a.m. in Moscow, and the attack on Ukraine has begun. We've been hearing of missiles or bombs or explosions in Kiev, in Kharkiv, in northeastern Ukraine, and in Mariupol, where Richard Engel is. We were on with him shortly a little while ago, and we heard an explosion while he was talking to us. There have been air raid sirens indicating an attack in Kiev right now, and we have seen pictures of people leaving, cars packing the highways, heading west out of the city to get away from what is going on there. Let's bring in Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News correspondent, who is live in Kiev. Aaron, what's the situation? It is 8 a.m. now. Much of this happened overnight. You and I were wondering why the sirens hadn't gone off. People may have been awoken by the explosions, but it's really as soon as morning came, those sirens were suddenly working, and people have packed into their cars and are getting out of town.
Yeah, the last siren we heard happened about 40 minutes ago, Ali. The last explosion we heard was about an hour and 20 minutes ago. We are now hearing from city authorities say that Kiev is under martial law, announcing that as of today, schools and kindergartens in the capital are closed. Hospitals and the entire medical system work in an intensified mode. And then they are also working to open up access to bomb shelters, saying all those who are not involved in the critical infrastructure and livelihoods of the city stay at home and be prepared to go to shelter if the sirens are turned on. We remind you that the shelters are marked on a map, and then this over Twitter providing a map of where they can find the shelters. Just in terms of those shelters, I was speaking to a city official, and they have enough, they believe, for 2.8 million people. That is not quite the population here in Kiev, so they do not have enough shelters for all of the residents, but they do have shelters for most of the residents. They've been working furiously to dust off those shelters. Now, in terms of what happened in the early hours of the morning, according to an advisor to the Minister of the Interior, confirming to journalists that cruise and ballistic missile strikes struck a number of locations around Kiev, primarily military installations as well as airfields. As far as we can tell, no civilian structures have been hit so far. Residents reported waking up to the sounds of these explosions, their windows rattling. People here are absolutely terrified. People are now trying to make their way to the western portion of the country, evacuating the city of Kiev. But I'm hearing also reports from some of my contacts here in Kiev that there is a traffic jam on the main roadway moving west as more and more people are trying to evacuate the city, Ali.
All right, Aaron, thanks very much. We're going to stay close to you as well. Please stay safe while you're there. I want to go to Peter Baker. He's the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. He's also the former Moscow bureau chief for the Washington Post. Peter, you heard Kieran me talking about this. We're trying to figure out, you can't figure out what the short game is until you figure out what Vladimir Putin's long game is. And he sends different messages to, depending on who he's talking to. He sends different messages to the Russian people than he does to the international community. He has this beef about NATO expansion, but he also talks a lot about rebuilding the Russian Empire, including going as far as to say a couple days ago that Ukraine's not really a country. It doesn't really have a real history as an independent country. This is absolutely not true, but it's resonating with some people.
Yeah, I think Vladimir Putin tonight is at war not just with Ukraine and not just with the international order, but with history. He is at war to restore the antebellum status quo prior to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. He's not going to do it all in one, one grab, in effect. But if he can reverse the loss of Ukraine, which has a historic resonance in Russia, he believes, it seems, that he will seal his legacy in the history books. Remember, he's been in power now for 23 years. He's almost 70 years old, and he's thinking about how he's going to be remembered. He spent the last 2 years in isolation because of the pandemic. More than most world leaders, he was separate from even his own team. And I think that has, put in him, at least the theory goes among some analysts, that this has put in him, an imperative to make a difference in a way that the old czars did. What were the czars remembered for? They were remembered for expanding the empire. In his case, it will be rebuilding the empire. So I think that it's a larger, goal here than simply NATO or simply, the Donbass or anything like that. He has history in mind.
What is the option left to the West right now? One thing that has been very clear is that America had very good intelligence about this. We even heard the president of Ukraine in recent weeks sort of saying it's not as bad as Americans seem to think it is. It seems that everything that the White House has expected to happen is happening now. Given that they have this intelligence, what do?
Yeah, well, remember exactly. The Russian officials in the last few days and weeks used words like hysteria and misinformation and false information to describe the American warnings that Russia would invade. And here we are in the early mornings, hours of today. In fact, they have invaded, or at least they certainly have begun an assault on their neighbor, inflicting military casualties. And I think that, it is hard for the West to deter or engage in diplomacy with somebody who, as we've just discussed, has what he believes is a historic mission, right? It's not about achieving certain diplomatic achievements. It's not about certain strategic concessions he's looking for. He's looking for something bigger. And it's hard to, that he's not going to get that at the negotiating table, and the West isn't going to give him that at the negotiating table, nor is Ukraine. So I think that's a real challenge for both for Ukraine and for the United States, for President Biden, because it looks like, these sanctions are not going to be a deterrent. They may be a punishment, but they won't stop President Putin. They haven't stopped President Putin from taking the action he's now taken.
We're going to have to see. Nothing has stopped him yet. We're going to have to see what actually ends up doing that. Peter, thank you for that. I want to bring in Ambassador Michael McFaul back into the conversation. He's a former ambassador to Russia. We were just, I was just looking at a Vladimir Zelensky tweet, but it's in Ukrainian and I can't read it. But it does appear that he has said that he was he's spoken to President Biden. He's spoken to the Chancellor of Germany. He's working the phones tonight. He is trying to get something, and he was very clear in Munich. He's been very clear every day that we need the West's help here. You've indicated that there are things that the West can do. What is Zelensky asking them to do tonight?
Well, obviously, I don't know for sure, but, we've been talking a lot tonight about the Russian military versus the Ukrainian military. What would be catastrophic is if the Ukrainian military ran out of weapons. Javelins, stingers, artillery shells. Those we probably don't provide, but other things that we can provide, that I think would be a first order ask that he would be seeking. And then, other Ukrainians, as we've been talking about, have said they need the kind of equipment for civilian defense. So I think the first order ask will be to make sure that that military assistance comes in. Second, it should go without saying, but tomorrow we should wake up and see shock and awe economic sanctions, no more targeted sanctions, no more ratcheting up, no more waiting to respond. The full arsenal needs to be deployed tomorrow, and it doesn't mean that that will end Putin's invasion. We've been crystal clear about that for hours now tonight, right? But I think it needs to be a wake-up call for all Russians. And, Ali, I want to say honestly, I used to be for targeted sanctions. I used to always say, we should target those close to Putin. The Russian people don't deserve to suffer. But at this moment, there has to be much more pressure on all of Russian society. And I hope that's one of the things that they were discussing in these phone calls.
My executive producer, Lauren Peikoff, who knows how to use the Twitter better than I do, just sent me Zelensky's tweet in English, in which he says, urge to stop Putin, war against Ukraine and the world immediately, building an anti-Putin coalition, immediate sanctions, which you just said, defense, and financial support. He also says close the airspace. Now let's talk about this for a second. Close the airspace. Can NATO do that? Can the U.S. do that? Ukraine's not a NATO country, but Ukraine is asking them to do that. What level of sanction, or does that cross the line into war?
Well, most certainly we might have some capability to do that. And others that I've been corresponding with in Ukraine, they're saying to do the same on the seas and in the oceans. And I don't even want to speculate about various scenarios, but they want to see if their ports are going to be closed. They want to see the international community to close off Russian ships. My guess is that the Biden administration will not want to go to that step yet, because that then risks entering into a military conflict with the Russian armed forces, and the president has made it crystal clear that he does not want to do that.
Ambassador, in some fashion, I think you've been on MSNBC every day in the last couple of months, and we've talked so frequently. But as this is happening, as this is unfolding, as we were listening to the sirens go off in Kiev, as we were hearing the explosions, what's the thing that you think people watching this, Americans, need to understand about what has happened tonight?
Well, first, I think we have to stop, framing Putin as some rational actor that wants to sit down and negotiate about NATO. Ali, I've been saying this for 20 years, that he has a certain ideology. He thinks in different ways than us, and he's risky. He's taken a really risky act today, the riskiest one before, but it's a long legacy. And I think we just need to have a much more accurate understanding of the enemy. And I'm going to call him an enemy that we are dealing with if we are part of the free world. I also think we need to call things good and evil. There's too much of this, fudging, his rational interest versus ours. This is an evil act by an evil man against innocent Ukrainians that do not deserve this. So we need some clarity. There is right and wrong in the world. There is good and evil. Sometimes my country has been part of good and bad things and evil things too. But tonight there is good and evil in the world, and it may not stop here. I think, we have just entered, this is the largest war in Europe since World War II. Wars don't end. These kind of scale of wars don't end overnight. And even if Russia wins in the first phase, as you were talking about earlier with one of your guests, they may win in the first phase. They have great asymmetry.
All right, we back.
When it comes to the airplanes and rockets. But Ukraine is not going to be subjugated. They're not going to give up. This is going to be a long, guerrilla war, maybe more passive means. It'll go on for a long time. I actually think it's the beginning of the end of Putin and Putinism. I think this was a catastrophic mistake on his part. He's throwing away decades of achievements in the eyes of the Russian people. But I don't know when that'll happen. I do think that will be the way we'll remember this history. But the last thing I would say is we're just in the first day of
they are
war.
super excited
and just think about it, everyone who's listening. Think about the
they
other
are
wars
super excited for a war with Russia. It's what the Democrats have wanted for years.
We'll all be home by Christmas. It's just going to be.
I don't get what our goal is in all of this. What exactly are we going to get out of this besides a high risk for mutual destruction?
That could possibly spread beyond Ukrainian borders.
So we are in an unusual world that is rife with misinformation. There are going to be a lot of people who wake up tomorrow morning, on Thursday morning in America, and they will not have given a lot of thought to Ukraine. It's a distant and abstract place to a lot of Americans, and they will be reading up, and they will see something in which Vladimir Putin has said. Maybe my control room has the maps of NATO in 1978 versus NATO now. But they will hear Vladimir Putin's argument and the argument of others that NATO pushed toward Russia. NATO backed Ukraine. NATO backed Russia into a corner. NATO kept taking these countries that were former Soviet republics and turned them into Western countries, and that is what has provoked this. What is somebody like you to say to that?
Well, you did. Kind
First
of.
thing I would say is
not to
go
for
to
Russia.
the journalofdemocracy.org and read my article about it. Because I got so tired of hearing these arguments, Ollie, that I just wrote it up. The first thing everybody should know is that that's his argument today. That's not what he said in 2002 about NATO. Go read it. I just put it in quotation marks from yesterday. He said it'd be fine if Ukraine joins NATO. He was nonchalant about other countries doing it. So that is a myth that he is a justification for this war that he was not talking about before. And I just think we need to lay that to rest.
Yeah, but he's kind of gotten old and crazy.
And if you don't believe me, then I want you to go and read every single word that Mr. Putin read to the Russian people. It was about an hour-long speech that he gave 2 days ago. I listened to most of it in Russian. The word NATO didn't come up until like halfway through. It was a rant about why the neo-Nazi coup that took over Ukraine in 2014, backed by the Americans, and he wants to do something about it. And that's what he told the Russian people today. He said denazification. That's what he talked about. He didn't talk about NATO. And let's just be clear, crystal clear. There's no Nazis ruling Kiev today. There has never been. Mr. Zelensky was voted in a free and fair election years after what happened in 2014. But this is much bigger for him. He thinks that he is uniting this country that has strayed away because they had this simple idea that they wanted to have free and fair elections and choose their leaders in free and fair elections and not have people sitting in Moscow tell them what to do. And now he wants them to pay the price. And that's why everybody in the free world that cares about freedom and democracy needs to be standing by Ukraine. And the last thing I'll say on this, it's not just about Ukraine. I think the lesson from history is when you think, faraway place.
I'm glad that it's not just about
what does
Ukraine.
Czechoslovakia have to do with
about
me?
Ukraine.
Right.
1939. What does Poland have to do with me? We had many Americans arguing that in 38 and 39. We know what happens later. If we don't take a stand to fight for freedom here, and I don't mean literally, I mean standing with the Ukrainians against this horrific invasion, it'll affect everywhere around the free world. not just in Ukraine.
I want to ask you this one thing, and I want to preface this by saying it shouldn't matter what people's choices are, that if you believe in self-determination, people get to make their own choices. Why is Ukraine different from a lot of its neighboring countries? Why didn't it join NATO earlier? Why did it go back and forth between pro-Russian governments and pro-Western governments? It's had 2 revolutions in the last 20 years.
Because it's right there.
Great question. Great question.
How's that?
Because the Ukrainian people, as President Zelensky so eloquently spoke today, and again, I urge your viewers to go listen or read his speech. It was a really powerful speech. Because the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government, didn't want to have war. They didn't want to have conflict with Russia. They tried to have a foot in the east, a foot in the west. Back to the Orange Revolution, Ollie, in 2004, I wrote a whole book about it back then. There was a revolution then, and they didn't say, oh, we're going to join NATO today. They didn't kick the Russian forces out of Crimea. They wanted peace with their neighbors to the east. And it was only after Russia attacked them in 2014 that this conversation about NATO began. If you're there alone, and you've shown those maps many times, you're there alone. You've already been attacked once. You already have lost territory to your neighbor through annexation once. Is it so irrational that you would want to join a security relationship, a NATO, an alliance that might protect you from going down that path again? And tragically, that's where the Ukrainians are tonight.
I want to, you mentioned the comments made by Vladimir Zelensky. He is an impassioned
and
good speaker.
They really want
he
the Ukraine to
let
be
out
in
a
trouble.
video. He had released a video
so,
earlier today, but we did also hear
that's
from...
what's so sick is that this guy is just you know, dicking down excited that that Russia's pulling this shit. Let's check in with some of just the live stationary cams. We're in Lugansk right now. Switch it over. This is Kiev. Looks like there is no noise. Or, I mean, no noise, no sound. And a lot of Russian bots in the chat. Or not Russian, Chinese bots. Here's that Kiev square with just the noise of the town. Oh, we got a couple more sirens, it looks like. Obviously, it could just be EMS.
Russia is a nuclear power. Obviously, that's not news to anybody watching this show. Why did he say it?
It was a warning to us. He's trying to say, don't get involved. It was very scary to me. When anybody invokes, we are a nuclear power, that is a very scary statement. And I think, again, to what we were talking about earlier, I think, you know, Mr. Putin is rather unhinged right now. He has been for a long time, in my view, but even more recently, he feels really unhinged to me. His conception of the world is not based in reality. Or if it is, he's just lying about it when he talks about it. And that, given his mindset, that was a very scary thing that he said tonight.
Yeah, I thought so too. Ambassador, thanks. We're going to take a quick break. We will, of course, continue our coverage of the attack on Ukraine that began this evening. You're watching MSNBC. We'll be right back.
All right. MSNBC is taking a little break. So here's the deal. We've been live for a while. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the stream off for a couple minutes and do a little reset. We'll be right back live in just a couple minutes. Obviously, there's live coverage anywhere, so I really appreciate you being here with us. And we will be back live any moment.